Welcome to the Pain Habit Book Club. I'm Drew Coverdale, and in this series I'll be reading through my book one chapter at a time to help you understand persistent pain in a different way. In this chapter we'll explore how meaning and memory link to pain and how understanding this can be one of the keys to help you recover. Chapter 4, Memory. Smelly Margaret from Darlington. Do you remember Smelly Margaret from Darlington? Of course you don't. There is no Smelly Margaret from Darlington. Imagine I was trying to remind you about her if I knew she was someone you knew in the past, but you just couldn't recall her. I'd use cues to bring her memory back, and I'd use anything I could to trigger her memory. Do you know Margaret from Darlington? We were together at college night in 2005. We had loads of great nights out at the ritzy nightclub. Big girl, lovely smile, blue eyes, and a dirty laugh. Now, all of these cues may not yet hit the mark enough to trigger your memory, but if I was certain that you knew her, I'd persist. Margaret, you do know her. She worked in the fish shop on North Road. You do know she worked in the fish shop on North Road. That one extra trigger makes the difference. You mean Smelly Margaret? Of course I remember Smelly Margaret from Darlington. She was Sheila's friend who worked in the betting shop. The memories flood back about Margaret, but so do the emotions. You might smile, laugh, or feel warm at remembering the good times you had, or even a little sadness for losing touch with her. The fish shop was the catalyst to access all the other associated memories and feelings. Once the memory or nerve pathway in the brain for Smelly Margaret fires, all the associated things linked to her have more potential to come to life. There's no point in holding this information in our conscious mind. It becomes unconscious to us until we sense sufficient cues to recall that person, time, or event. When we do, we have the potential to feel the emotions linked to that memory. Memories and emotions are recalled through being tagged with other associated things to help bring those memories to life. Once enough of those tags are triggered, the pathway fires. The small cells in your brain that make up these nerve pathways are called neurons. Lots of neurons form a neurotag, which is a circuit that fires where there's an output from the brain. This output could be a thought, memory, movement, pain, decision, mood, behavior, or any other conceivable expression of the brain and body working together. All of these have neurotags making them happen. And the brain can be thought of as millions of overlapping and interconnected neurotags that control all of the output from the brain. So the Smelly Margaret pathway only fires when enough of the neurons in that neurotag are triggered. In her case, that neurotag had information associated with things such as the year 2005 at college, Darlington, ritzy nightclub, being a big girl, having blue eyes, a dirty laugh, working at the fish shop, having a friend called Sheila. It wasn't until the fish shop was mentioned that the threshold was reached. Then that firing opened up the neurotags and other brain outputs occurred. Other emotions such as smiling, laughing, or maybe sadness flood back. And the awareness of other memories, such as where a friend Sheila worked, and lots of nights out that they had together. Pain works in exactly the same way. We encode pain according to what it has been associated with. You store that as a pain neurotag in your unconscious memory linked to things that were present when you first felt that pain. It's ready to be used when that context or something similar appears in your life again. Your pain is likely to have negative emotions, people, places, time, situations, descriptions, and diagnosis linked to it. They all have their own individual neurotag circuits in the brain. They're all interlinked, so thinking of one can fire off another. Some are more powerful at influencing others, and because of our bias to look out for danger, the negative emotional neurotags are very dominant. When they fire, they can trigger the other neurotags, bringing lots of memories, behaviors, physical responses, and other related outputs rushing back. If enough component parts of a pain neurotag are triggered, then pain can be experienced in the tissue, even though it does not arise from actual damage or overload. It's a really important line, that. It's like only when all the individual parts of the orchestra play together do you actually get to hear the symphony. Unfortunately, the pain in this case is not music to your ears. Fortunately, there are other neurotags that can interrupt, reduce, and balance the din. They include emotions, different behaviors, movements, thoughts, and outputs. You develop these calming neurotags as you learn. These are things like your mum's caring facial expression, a hug telling you to be okay, learning how to put on a plaster, understanding recovery time after an injury, and how to protect yourself in that situation. You unconsciously code all this information so you can soothe and treat yourself, prevent it from happening again, and maybe care for others if they experience that event. You must have the calming neurotags in place to know how to instruct them, and they have to be learned. This gives you the potential as the conductor to stop the orchestra and instruct it to play a different, beautiful piece of music that you like the sound of. We have this amazing network of interconnected outputs in the brain, triggering pain and reducing it. You have neurotags for reproducing every painful experience in your life. Most of them are totally unconscious to you because you have other calming neurotags that are now dominant over them. There'd be little point in thinking about them all day long and keeping those nerve pathways alive because our lives would be full of that pain. So the stubbed toe, being bullied, feeling upset after being called a name, the paper cut, bang on the head, breakup of a relationship, or a twisted ankle all hurt at the time, but you recover from all of them. They're all pathways that fire to help warn you of the same thing happening again so you can prevent it. But if it does happen again, you have an array of self-soothing nerve pathways that trigger conscious and unconscious responses to eventually feel okay again. They form the protective armor of physical emotional resilience that makes you who you are. The thing about pain neurotags is that they can become dominant. If they've been wired to very strong negative emotions at the time of experiencing pain, they have the potential to influence that particular pain neurotag. In the same way as recalling Smelly Girl from Darlington triggers a certain name in your head, a powerful negative emotion can trigger a pain to which it is tagged. Because we are so inclined towards survival, sometimes these connections become too powerful, and it's like they grow arms and legs. They become so intertwined with other behaviors, emotions, situations, and cues that there are numerous ways for that pain to manifest. It is this excessively strong attachment to negative emotions without enough calming nerve pathways. Just going to let somebody else in. I'll restart that chapter, that paragraph, sorry. It is this excessively strong attachment to negative emotions without enough calming nerve pathways to stop or reduce it that makes your persistent pain continue. You may never have been shown or learned the correct calming, healthy, self-soothing strategies that define physical and emotional resilience. Having a balanced, conscious counter-argument to pain and the ability to select the right response to that unconscious, painful drive for protection is the key for pain to subside. With persistent pain, the dominant negative emotions attached to it have become dominant through being repeated thousands and thousands of times. When a pathway is repeated so many times, the effort required to fire it becomes less. The brain actually starts to physically change in response to that process. There are supportive cells around the neurons in the brain called glial cells, and they lay down a tissue called myelin along that repeated nerve pathway, which means the impulse along it can travel much faster, which means, it's like putting insulation around copper wire so that the circuit fires much more efficiently. The brain loves using energy efficiently, so it uses this process so output becomes a habit requiring such little brain activity that you don't even recognize that you are doing it. Repetition of the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in your life linked to your pain unwittingly creates your pain. You develop the pain habit, and whenever you experience that pain, how do you interpret it? Through beliefs that your pain is due to damage of some sort, that you can't do anything about it, or are a victim of it. It triggers the negative emotions in you attached to those beliefs. What do those negative emotions then trigger? Your pain. And when another threatening cue appears linked to it, such as movement, a workplace, a person, an adversary, weather, or anything else your brain has connected to it, cycle repeats and the habit is reinforced. All the physiological conscious and unconscious behaviors bring the whole experience to life. It is real, and it comes with spasm, tenderness, restricted movements, words, facial reactions, vivid descriptions of it to others who ask about it, and even the response they give you. These things play out, the routine ends, and the habitual behaviors pause until the cue arrives again. It's like a closed loop. We recognize the cues at a conscious level to trigger the pain habit. These are things you know can bring your pain on or make it worse. Your brain also recognizes cues at an unconscious level. The tiny glial cells surrounding the neurons play their part in this too, through recognizing certain molecular patterns in the body and then priming those neurons by exciting them and raising the potential for them to fire more quickly. Tiny cells of the body unconsciously affect and make real changes within you even before you're consciously aware of it. You only become aware once you feel the output of that mechanism, which is your pain. It was originally thought these cells were only involved in tasks like removing waste, giving structure, insulation, and protection to neurons. We now know that they have the ability to recognize certain molecular patterns, which leads them to influence the neuron and raise its likelihood to fire. So your nervous system is influenced by your immune system as it recognizes molecular patterns related to damage, disease-causing organisms, and foreign substances like drugs. It's a detection system looking out for something that doesn't belong. So when these appear, it's more likely that you will feel pain quicker than if they didn't. This gives one explanation of why when you suffer physical damage, it's more likely that even gentle pressure produces that pain without new damage. You've experienced a headache on its own, but when you experience one and you also got a cold, it feels worse because that headache pathway is much easier to fight due to your system recognizing the presence of a virus. Research is now showing that foreign substances like opioids, which although they help acute pain, they actually make the pain more likely to fire during the persistent pain state. This suggests the potential reason why many people must take stronger drugs to get the same effect or get no effect at all from taking them. There are two more ideas about how glial cells sense molecular patterns and influence pain, and these are linked to behaviors and thoughts. The behaviors could be something like an instinctual response to seeing a snake, which can create a rapid shift within the body that activates systems detecting danger. The more speculative idea is that the concept of conscious thought becoming associated with molecular patterns. If a threatening thought is communicated at a cellular level, it creates that glial immune response, just like damage, disease-making organisms, foreign substances, or reflex behaviors. This idea that a thought can trigger a cascade of activity resulting in pain is now seen as entirely feasible by many of the world's leading pain scientists, and there's compelling evidence to support it. Whatever the mechanism driving your pain, the paradox is that you feel it repeatedly or constantly, not because of actual tissue damage, if there was any in the first place, but because of that level of sensitivity your brain and body have developed. Anything and everything that looks like a threat to that hypersensitive system can set off your pain. The brain can create that output of pain through unlimited combinations of the variables linked to it. The resultant changes that develop through the strong connections with the emotional parts of the brain can actually be seen on functional MRI scanning of brains in persistent pain. And once these connections are established, the strength of any emotion in your life from the past, present, or future can have a huge influence on your pain. What I'd say here, since reading this back, is they can redo scans after they've done pain reprocessing therapy, and the brain changes back. And it can happen within 4 weeks. So what you see reversing one way, we see going one way, you can go back over. You may not have ever realized your pain could truly be influenced by the cue of emotion, but many people intuitively feel their pain is worse when they are stressed. This is the reason why when something more believable, such as tissue damage, is presented to you as the reason for pain, you look only for the things linked to that idea of the damage. You and thousands of others head down the path of physical examination and investigation, where medical practitioners make assessments, diagnoses, and treatments based on similar beliefs. It's important that structural causes for persistent pain are ruled out. However, there is no reason for persistent pain from a structural cause to be present for longer than 3 months, unless there's a more serious cause. The reasons for this could be cancer, an autoimmune disease, an undiagnosed fracture, an ongoing infection. Beyond this, it is the brain and body sensitivity to its environment that drives the pain. That is why the singular tissue-based or tablet-based approaches to persistent pain have always been destined to fail, and why your pain persists despite more interventions than you can recall. Pain is just a warning, but yours continues because it has never been calmed through the strategies you've been taught, through getting the right information or receiving the correct treatment for it. It becomes stuck and driven by emotions, and whenever that emotion arises in your life again, which pain, out of every pain you've ever experienced, comes back? Your pain. Your painful movements trigger the emotion, and your emotions trigger the painful movement. It becomes an easily excitable pathway that can be set off from either end through movement or thought. A vicious cycle develops that can feel impossible for the patient and their practitioner to break. However fascinating it is to understand this mechanism behind pain, it does not give us all the answers. The why it happened to you is all you're interested in. The why it happened to you is all that you're interested in understanding, and that is fundamental in being able to change your perception of it. Once you understand what your pain is protecting you from, and there is nothing to fear in that, the perception you hold begins to change, and so does your pain. It is the perception you held before you even experienced your current pain that has contributed to its stain. When you realize that perception is something that was taught to you, you have the choice to learn how to change that perception. I like the way that sometimes I write these sentences at the end. It sounds dead easy. Each time I read it, I realize it's rock hard. Thanks for joining me in this chapter of The Pain Habit. If something resonated with you, then let me know in the comments. I read everyone. You can find a link to the book in the description, and don't forget to subscribe so you can follow on with other chapters. Until next time, be curious, be kind, and keep listening to what your body is really telling you.